The Allagash Wilderness in northern Maine is a vast, silent landscape, millions of acres of untouched forest, dark lakes, and endless stretches of sky that at night feel almost too large, too empty, too aware. In August of 1976, 4 young men, 2 brothers and 2 close friends, entered that wilderness for a weekend of fishing and camping. What followed has become one of the strangest, most disturbing and still unresolved cases in American history. They entered the Allagash with excitement, carrying backpacks, supplies, and a canoe. They were artists, outdoorsmen, and students, adventurous but rational, grounded men who had no reason to believe that the forest was anything other than peaceful. But on their first night they all sensed it: the woods were too still. Not quiet in a comforting way, but quiet in the way of something waiting. No insects, no wind, no movement in the trees. Just silence, deep and unnatural. On the second night, while they were out on the lake, one of the men pointed at something in the sky, a single bright light hovering above the tree line. At first they joked that it was a plane or maybe a star. But the light wasn't twinkling. It was growing larger, brighter, closer. Within seconds, a strange brilliance washed over the lake, bathing the dark water in a cold, white glow. The men paddled frantically for shore, but the light followed, moving silently, perfectly, with intelligence. They reached land only moments before the light seemed to descend, slow, deliberate, as though choosing them. Then, without warning, everything went black. Not naturally black. Not fainting, not falling unconscious. Just gone. A missing slice of time carved clean out of existence. A moment that none of them could remember. When consciousness returned, the 4 men were standing on the shore. Their canoe was pulled far up onto the bank. The campfire they had built only minutes earlier was nothing more than glowing ash, burned down far faster than possible. The men were disoriented, nauseated, confused. Hours had passed. None of them remembered paddling to shore. None remembered walking. None remembered speaking. And none could explain how they had lost so much time in an instant. The rest of the night was marked by a haunting sense of dread. They barely slept. In the morning they packed their gear and left the wilderness early, trying to pretend nothing had happened. But all 4 of them carried something out of the woods, an invisible weight pressing against their consciousness, a memory trying to surface, an instinct screaming that something was terribly wrong. Over the following weeks, the men began experiencing the same nightmares, without telling each other. In their dreams they were restrained, lying on metal tables beneath blinding lights. Shadowy figures stood above them, silent but moving with purpose. The figures were not human. Their faces were smooth and pale. Their heads disproportionately large. Their eyes, dark, endless, expressionless, observed the men with an unspoken intensity. The dreams became more frequent, more vivid, more synchronized. Eventually the men admitted the truth. They were seeing the same exact things in the same exact order, alongside the same exact figures. But how? They had never described their dreams to one another. They had never even suggested the possibility of something otherworldly. They had tried to bury the incident, but the incident would not stay buried. Finally, desperate for answers, they sought the help of a psychiatrist trained in memory regression. Separately, one by one, the 4 men underwent hypnosis. Each one recounted the same events with disturbing accuracy. They remembered being taken aboard a craft. They remembered being examined. They remembered being touched by cold instruments. They remembered voices, not spoken aloud but echoing directly into their minds. And they remembered fear unlike anything they had ever known. One of the men described a moment when he tried to move but couldn't. Another described the sensation of something entering his arm, painless but invasive, followed by a cold numbness spreading through his body. Another described a being standing inches from his face, staring into his eyes, communicating without words. The final man described the overwhelming feeling that the figures were not experimenting, but studying. Even more unsettling, all 4 men described being paralyzed, unable to speak, unable to resist. They described the figures' eerie coordination, moving in silent synchronization as though sharing a single mind. They described a room filled with symbols they couldn't understand and a hum vibrating through their entire bodies. After the hypnosis sessions, the men underwent medical examinations. All 4 had unusual, identical marks on their bodies, small circular scars they had never noticed before. The marks matched the exact locations they had described in their hypnotic recollections. As word spread, skeptics dismissed the story as mass hallucination, sleep paralysis, or shared delusion. But the consistency of the men's memories, and the physical evidence, was impossible to ignore. Most chilling of all was the fact that the men had no motive to lie. Their lives were stable. Their reputations were on the line. They gained nothing from telling the story, and in fact suffered ridicule for doing so. Decades later, investigators revisiting the case have found no evidence of fraud. No contradictions. No cracks in the story. All four men, even in old age, stuck to the same account with unwavering certainty. Their voices still trembled when discussing what they saw. Their eyes still drifted away when asked about the missing hours. Whatever they encountered in the Allagash Wilderness did something to them, physically, mentally, permanently. Today the lake remains quiet. Too quiet. Campers still report strange lights hovering in the distance. Fishermen describe sudden stillness in the air, like the world is holding its breath. Some claim they feel watched when paddling across the water at night, as though something is just beneath the surface, waiting. The Allagash Four never returned to the lake. They never dared. But they all agreed on one thing. Something intelligent found them in the wilderness that night. Something that saw them, not just as visitors to the forest, but as specimens. If you have your own theory about what happened to the Allagash Four, share it in the comments. And if you want more real-life horror stories, unsolved mysteries, and chilling encounters from across the world, make sure you subscribe. Because the truth is, the world is far stranger than we think, and sometimes the darkness looks back.